My friend, thank you for joining me today. I want to share a story with you. It is a very personal story about learning to speak English with confidence. I hope it can inspire you. If you feel shy or afraid to speak English, you are not alone. I understand you because I was the same. When I was a child, I was very afraid to speak English. In my school, we mostly used our native language. English was just another subject in class. I learned some grammar and vocabulary, but I never really spoke English outside the classroom. One day, my teacher asked me to read a short paragraph in English in front of the class. My hands were shaking as I stood up. I could feel my heart beating very fast. As I started to read, I mispronounced a word. The word was world, but I said it wrong. Some of my classmates giggled. My face became hot and red. I felt so embarrassed and small at that moment. I quickly finished reading and sat down, wishing I could disappear. After that day, I became even more shy to speak English. I was afraid that I would make more mistakes and that people would laugh at me. In my mind, speaking English became something scary. Every time I thought about speaking, I imagined all the things that could go wrong. What if I can't find the right word? What if I say something wrong? What if everyone thinks I am stupid? These thoughts played in my head again and again. Because of this fear, I tried to avoid speaking English whenever I could. In class, I never raised my hand, even if I knew the answer to a question. I would look down at my book, hoping the teacher would not call my name. If a tourist came to our town and asked for help in English, I would quickly run away or just shrug because I was too scared to try. I felt trapped by this fear. I saw other students who could talk easily in English, and I admired them. I wished I could be like them, but I believed I could not. This fear followed me as I grew older. When I went to high school, we had an English speaking club. My best friend asked me to join it with her. She said it would be fun and a good way to practice. But I refused to go. I imagined everyone at the club speaking so well and me in the corner, too afraid to say a word. I thought they would judge me or laugh at my accent. So I never went to that club. Instead, I would go home after class and keep to myself. I remember one day in high school, there was an event where a few students had to welcome a group of exchange students from another country. The school wanted some volunteers to give a short welcome speech in English. My teacher looked at me and said, "You could do it. Your English grades are good on paper." I panicked inside and immediately shook my head. I said, "No, I can't." I did not even want to think about it. The idea of speaking on a microphone in English in front of everyone made me feel like I was going to faint. They chose another student for the speech, a girl who was always confident and outgoing. On the day of the event, I watched her speak. Her English was not perfect. She made a few small mistakes in grammar, but she smiled and continued. She even made a joke that made everyone laugh, in a good way. The exchange students clapped and thanked her. I was happy for her, but I also felt a little jealous and sad. I wished I had that kind of courage. That night, I thought a lot. I realized that my fear was controlling my life. I missed many chances because I was too afraid. I asked myself, will I always be this scared to speak? How will I ever improve if I never try? I knew the answer was simple. I could not improve without trying. I had to change something. But the thought of suddenly speaking a lot still felt too hard, so I decided to start very small, in a way that felt safe. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom. My voice trembled as I said softly, "Hello, how are you today?" to my own reflection. It felt strange to talk to myself in English. I felt a little silly and even laughed at myself after I said it. But I also felt proud that I tried. It was a small step, but it was a new beginning. Every day after that, I started a little routine. When I woke up and got ready, I would spend 5 minutes talking to myself in the mirror in English. I would say simple things like describing my plans for the day. For example, I would say, "Today I will go to school. After school, I will do my homework. In the evening, I will watch an English movie. At first, it was very hard to find the words. I had to pause and think a lot. I made many mistakes. Sometimes I didn't know a word and I had to use a dictionary or guess. But since I was alone, I did not feel embarrassed. There was no one to judge me. Slowly, I became more comfortable forming sentences out loud. The words started to come to me a little faster each time. My pronunciation improved bit by bit because I could hear myself speaking every day. One day, after about 2 months of this mirror practice, something happened that showed me it was helping. A new student joined our class from another city. He sat next to me. During the break, he tried to talk to me in English because he thought I might not speak his language. Maybe he did not know the local language well. Normally, I would have felt nervous and tried to avoid the conversation. But that day, I felt surprisingly calm. It was as if my mouth knew what to do, because I had been training it every morning. He said, "Hi, my name is David. I just moved here." I smiled and answered, "Hi, David, nice to meet you." I told him my name, then asked, "Where are you from?" The words came out naturally. We ended up talking for a few minutes. I asked him how he liked the school, and he told me about his old school. Our conversation was simple and not very long, but to me it was like climbing a mountain and reaching the first hill. After he left, I realized something. I had just spoken English with someone new, and nothing bad happened. In fact, it was actually nice. He didn't laugh at me. He didn't look confused. He understood me, and I understood him. That small conversation made me feel a warm feeling inside. I was so proud of myself. After this, I gained a little more confidence. I continued my mirror talks every morning, but now I wanted to do more. I thought about the English speaking club that I had avoided before. Maybe I could try joining it now. My friend was still a member of the club, and she was happy when I told her I wanted to come. The next week, I went with her to the club meeting. I was very nervous when I walked into the room. I remember my palms sweating as I held a notebook in case I needed to write something. There were about 10 students in the club that day. They were sitting in a circle. The club leader was a friendly English teacher, Miss Clara, who greeted everyone. She suggested we start with a simple activity. Each person would introduce themselves and say one thing they like. When it was my turn to speak, my heart pounded again. But I took a deep breath, and I introduced myself just like I had practiced in the mirror. I told everyone my name and said that I like reading books and that I want to improve my speaking. My voice was quiet and I stumbled on one word, but I did it. Everyone smiled and clapped softly, as it was the club's habit to clap after each introduction. One boy gave me a thumbs up. I realized that this was a safe place. All of us in the club were learning. No one was there to judge or laugh. This made me relax a little. As the weeks went by, I kept attending the speaking club. Each week, we did different fun activities like telling short stories, playing word games, or discussing simple topics like our favorite food or dream travel destinations. I found that every time I spoke, it became a little easier. I also enjoyed listening to others. We all had different accents and made different mistakes, and that was okay. In fact, sometimes the mistakes were funny and we would all laugh together, not in a mean way. For example, one time I said kitchen when I meant to say chicken. We ended up laughing, and I didn't feel bad because I knew everyone understood it was a slip of the tongue. I learned to laugh at myself too. If I made a mistake, I could say, "Oops," and continue. This was a big change for me. Before, I would have been very embarrassed to make a mistake like that in front of people. Now I realized it was not a big problem. Around this time, I also made a close friend in the club, a girl named Sarah. Sarah had a story that inspired me a lot. She told me that when she first joined the club, a year before I did, she could barely say a full sentence in English because of her nerves. She had moved to our town from a rural area and had even less experience with English than I did. She said that in her first club meeting, she was so scared she almost ran out of the room when it was her turn to speak. But she stayed, and over time she improved tremendously. When I met her, she spoke English quite well, with only a few pauses here and there. I was surprised when she told me how shy she used to be. Sarah said the club and daily practice changed her life. She used to stand in front of the mirror too, just like I did, and she would practice speaking for 10 minutes every night before bed. She also started listening to English songs and watching English cartoons, trying to copy the characters. It impressed me how far she had come. Her story was like a vision of my own future. I thought that if she could go from being so scared to speaking confidently, maybe I could too. Sarah became both a friend and a role model to me. By the time I finished high school, I was a different person than the little girl who had been too afraid to say a word. I was still not a perfect English speaker, far from it, but I was much more comfortable than before. I could hold basic conversations, I could introduce myself without panic, and I even started to think in English sometimes when I was alone. On my last day of school, I remember our English teacher asked if anyone wanted to say something about their experience learning English in school, in any language. To my own surprise, I raised my hand. Standing up in class, I thanked my teacher in English. I said, "Thank you for helping me. I enjoyed learning English with you." It was a very simple sentence, but it meant so much to me that I could say it out loud without fear. My teacher smiled proudly, and a couple of my classmates gave me high fives after class. I felt like I was standing at the top of a small hill, looking at many bigger hills ahead, but now I had the courage to keep climbing. After high school, I decided to continue working on my English speaking skills. I knew that if I stopped practicing, I might lose the progress I made. Also, I simply wanted to get better. I had discovered a new love for the language. In the past, English was just a scary school subject for me. Now it had become a key to new worlds, new friends, new books, new movies, and possibly new opportunities in the future. That summer, I set a goal for myself. I would speak in English for at least a few minutes every day, no matter what. If I had no one to talk to, I would talk to myself or even to my dog in English. My dog did not understand, of course, but he enjoyed the attention and wagged his tail. Sometimes I recorded my voice on my phone while I spoke about my day in English. Then I would listen to it. At first, I hated hearing my own voice. I think many people feel that way, but I got used to it, and it helped me notice which words I mispronounced, so I could try them again. During that summer, I also experienced a small setback. One afternoon, I went to a cafe that was popular with tourists. I heard a couple near me speaking in English. They sounded like they were from the United States. I gathered all my courage and decided to try to talk to them. I walked up and said, "Hello, are you visiting here?" They smiled and said yes. I started a conversation with them. I asked them about their trip and if they liked our town. We talked for a few minutes. I was thrilled because this was my first time speaking with native English speakers outside of a school setting. They were very kind and patient. But at one point, I tried to explain something and I completely blanked on a word. I got nervous and ended up switching to my native language for that word, even though they didn't understand it. I felt embarrassed. I apologized to them, but they told me it was okay and even tried to guess what I wanted to say. Finally, I remembered the English word and said it. We all laughed about it. They said, "Your English is good, don't worry." Even though they were nice, after the conversation ended and I walked home, I started feeling bad. I kept thinking about that moment when I forgot the word. I thought to myself, I still can't speak without messing up. Will I always have this problem? That evening, I felt a bit down, and my old fear started creeping back. I had to remind myself that making mistakes or forgetting words is completely normal. Even people who speak a language their whole lives sometimes forget words or get nervous. I remembered how those tourists said, "Don't worry." It was a small mistake in an otherwise good conversation. Why was I focusing on the one bad moment instead of all the good minutes where I successfully spoke with them? The next day, I talked about this with my mother. She is not fluent in English, but she is very wise about life. She said, "You have improved so much. One forgotten word doesn't erase that. Be proud of how far you have come." She was right. I realized I needed to keep a positive mindset. Instead of seeing mistakes as failures, I could see them as steps forward. Every mistake was a lesson showing me what I could work on next. After the summer, I went to college in the nearest city. There, English became even more important. Some of my courses were in English, and many of my classmates could speak English quite fluently. At first, this made me feel that same old fear again. On the first day of one class, the professor asked us to discuss a topic in small groups. I sat in a group with 3 other students. They all started speaking in English right away, and they spoke so fast. I felt that same heavy feeling of nervousness in my stomach. For a moment, I considered staying silent or speaking in our native language to see if they would switch. But then I remembered why I was there. I wanted to learn and grow. This was a chance to practice. When it was my turn to speak, I talked slowly and carefully. "I think that the topic is very interesting, but I also have some questions about it," I said. My grammar was not perfect and my accent was strong, but the others listened. One of them responded to my points and kindly answered my questions. We actually had a nice discussion. I realized that they did not care if my English was perfect. They cared about the ideas I was sharing. This was a big lesson for me. People mostly care about communicating, not about counting your mistakes. If you can communicate your idea, you are succeeding. During my time at college, I continued to find ways to practice speaking. I found out that there was an English conversation circle held in the library once a week. It was open to anyone, students, staff, even people from the community. The idea was just to chat in English for an hour on different topics. I decided to go one week. I walked into a library meeting room and saw a mix of people. There were other students like me, a few international students from different countries who spoke English, and even an older gentleman who was a retired teacher just joining for fun. We sat in a circle and introduced ourselves. Right away, I could feel the friendly atmosphere. For an hour, we talked about our hobbies, our cultures, and funny things that happened to us recently. I found myself laughing and even telling a joke about something that happened in the dormitory. To my surprise, the others laughed at my joke. That made me feel accepted and more confident. I started attending the conversation circle every week. It became the best part of my week because it was both fun and great practice. The more I went, the more I realized that speaking English was becoming natural. Of course, I still had to think about some words and I still made errors. But I stopped feeling shy about it. If I didn't know a word, I would politely ask, "How do you say?" Or I would try to explain it in a different way. People were always willing to help me find the word I was looking for. I also did the same for others when they were stuck. It felt good to help someone else with a word or phrase. Sometime during my second year of college, a memorable thing happened. I was part of a student volunteer group, and we were hosting a small international student welcome event. I was helping with organizing. not expecting to speak much. We had a guest speaker scheduled to give a welcome speech, but at the last minute, that person got sick and couldn't come. The organizers were panicking, wondering who could fill in. There were some quick discussions and whispers. Then one of my friends from the group pointed at me and said, "She can do it. Her English is good and she knows what to say." I was surprised when I heard my name being suggested. Immediately, I felt a jolt of nerves. I felt like saying, "No, no, I can't." But as I opened my mouth, another voice inside me said, "Maybe I can. Why not try?" I found myself agreeing to do it. I remember standing at the front of the auditorium with a microphone in my hand. There were about 50 people in the audience, including many new international students from different countries and some faculty members. My heart was beating fast, but I wasn't shaking like I did in the past. I started speaking, "Hello everyone, welcome to our university." I introduced myself and welcomed them, and then I shared how excited we were to have them here. I made a small joke about how I also felt a bit lost on my first day on campus, which got a few chuckles from the audience. As I spoke, I saw some friendly faces in the crowd nodding and smiling. That encouraged me to keep going. I spoke for about 3 minutes. It wasn't a long speech, and it wasn't a grand, perfect talk. But it was clear and warm. When I finished, people clapped. I looked to my friends at the side of the stage. They were clapping, and one gave me a thumbs up. I had done it. I had given a speech in English, on the spot, without preparation, in front of a crowd. If you had told me a few years earlier that I would do something like this, I would have laughed or maybe cried from fear. But there I was. That moment was a turning point for me. After the event, I walked home alone under the evening sky. I felt a mix of tiredness and happiness. I realized that my fear of speaking English had become so much smaller. It was not gone completely. I think a little nervousness is normal and okay. But it was now a small voice, not a giant shadow over me. I started thinking of all the experiences that brought me to this point. I remembered practicing in front of the mirror, small conversations with classmates, joining the club, talking to tourists, attending conversation circles, and now this speech. Each step was like laying one brick. And now I saw the house built from those bricks. It was like a small house of confidence that I could step into and feel at home when speaking English. Not long after that event, I had another interesting opportunity. I saw a poster on campus about a program where students could volunteer to help teach English conversation to refugees who had recently moved to our city. These were people who came from countries where they had faced difficult times, and they were starting a new life here. I thought about how hard it must be for them to learn a new language while also adjusting to a new culture. Because I remembered my own journey with English, I felt empathy and wanted to help. I signed up to volunteer once a week. The first day I went to the community center to meet the group of refugees, I was a bit nervous. I was going to be on the other side now. I was not the learner this time, but the one helping others learn. I worried, am I good enough to teach someone else? But when I arrived, I found that I was not alone. There were a few volunteers and a coordinator. We had a small group of 5 adult learners. My job was to just talk with them in very simple English and help them practice basic conversations like introducing themselves or talking about their day. I remember sitting with a woman named Amina, who was from a country in North Africa. She was very shy and hardly looked up. She reminded me of myself a few years back. We started with simple things. I said, "Hello. What is your name?" She answered softly, telling me her name. As we continued, she started to relax a little. By the end of the session, she was telling me the names of her children and her favorite food, using the English words she knew. It was a slow conversation, with many pauses and gestures, and sometimes we used a phone translation app. But we communicated. When I praised her, saying, "You're doing very well," she smiled brightly. I could see a spark of pride in her eyes. On my way home that day, I felt something new. I felt the joy of helping someone else find their confidence, the way others had helped me. It made me appreciate my journey even more. Teaching or practicing English with someone even less confident than me made me realize just how far I had come. I continued to volunteer in that program each week. Over time, I saw Amina and the others become a little more confident. At the start, Amina could barely speak above a whisper. A few weeks later, she greeted me with a loud, clear, "Hello, how are you?" when I arrived. We both smiled at that progress. Each week they learned a few new words and tried using them. It was amazing to witness their courage growing step by step. A few years ago, I could not have imagined being in this position. Back then, I was the one needing encouragement, and now I could give encouragement. By the time I finished college, speaking English had become a natural part of my life. I had friends from different countries with whom I only spoke English. I had read novels and watched movies entirely in English. Sometimes I even dreamed in English. The shy student who once panicked at the idea of saying hello now could have casual chats or even discuss ideas in this second language. After college, I got a job at a company where I often had to communicate with international clients. In my first week, my boss asked me to lead a call with a client from abroad because I was one of the few people on the team comfortable speaking English. I prepared carefully for the call, and it went well. My boss was pleased and told me, "I'm glad we have you to handle our English-speaking clients." I smiled and thanked him. Inside, I thought about how strange it was that I used to avoid speaking English, and now it was one of the reasons I was appreciated at work. In my personal life, too, English opened new doors. I could travel more easily and actually talk to local people or other travelers without fear. I remember one trip where I went with some friends to an international youth camp. We met people from many different countries. English was the common language for all of us. At the camp, everyone had different accents when they spoke English, and no one spoke perfectly, but we all understood each other. I remember a girl from Italy who would sometimes use an Italian word by accident when she was telling a story in English. We would all laugh when we realized what happened, and she would laugh too. Then she would teach us the Italian word she said by mistake, and we would teach her the English word for it. In that way, even mistakes became a fun chance to learn about each other. Some of my new friends even tried to learn a few words of my language. I heard an American boy trying to say "thank you" in my language with a very strong accent. It sounded funny, but I appreciated that he tried. No one teased him. We helped him pronounce it better and clapped when he got it right. I was able to laugh, sing, and tell stories around the campfire in English. I made friends that I still keep in touch with. And one night at that camp, under the wide sky, I realized that I was sitting under the stars, talking comfortably in English, and I was not scared. I thought about a younger version of me who would not believe this. I felt proud and grateful. Now, I won't pretend that I speak English perfectly. I still learn new words all the time. I still have an accent. And sometimes I need to ask someone to repeat something if they speak too fast or use a phrase I don't know. But these things don't worry me anymore. They are just part of the ongoing journey. Learning a language is not a pass-fail exam. where one day you become 100% fluent and never make a mistake again. No, it is more like a long trip where you keep discovering new things along the way. You can always grow more, but that does not mean you are not good enough now. I have learned to enjoy the process and not just focus on the destination. I also learned that confidence is something you build step by step, almost like building a muscle. Every time you use that muscle, it gets a bit stronger. Every time you push yourself to say something when you are afraid, you give yourself a little more courage for the next time. Confidence is not about suddenly becoming fearless. It is often about being afraid but doing it anyway, and then realizing the fear is slowly getting quieter. If someone asked me, "What is the secret to building confidence in speaking English?" I would say, based on my experience, the secret is to practice often, start small, and be kind to yourself. Remember that everyone has to start somewhere, and every expert was once a beginner. When I felt very afraid, I used to imagine that others would judge me. But in reality, most people are understanding. Many people have learned or are learning a new language themselves, or they simply appreciate that you are trying. And the ones who do judge are not worth worrying about, because their negative view is their problem, not yours. Looking back, I'm so happy that I took those first small steps. They seemed so hard at the time, but they made everything that came after possible. There were times I stumbled or felt discouraged, but I kept going. Sometimes I moved forward quickly, sometimes very slowly, but I was always moving forward. And you know what? Eventually I looked back, and the starting point was far behind me. I want to tell you one more thing to end. This story is happening right now as I speak these words. Remember how at the beginning I told you I was once afraid to speak? Well, here I am now, speaking to you in English, sharing my story on this podcast. Years ago, I would not have imagined myself doing this. I would have thought, no way, I can't speak for so long. People will laugh at my accent or I will mess up. But here I am, and I am comfortable and even happy to do it. It shows me that fear truly can be overcome and that confidence can be built with time. If you are listening to me and you feel similar fears about speaking English, I want you to know that you can overcome them too. It will not happen overnight, and it will require patience. But each time you practice, each time you say a word or a sentence, you're taking a step forward. Some days will feel easier, some will feel harder, but do not give up. You have more strength and ability than you think. So whenever you feel afraid, remember that every one of us who speaks English has been in your place at one time or another. You are not alone in this journey. Keep practicing and keep speaking, even if it is just a few words each day. Your voice deserves to be heard, and it will get stronger each time you use it. One day, you will tell your own story of success. I can't wait to hear it when you do, because I know that day will come. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it inspired you and made you feel encouraged. Remember that every big journey begins with a small step, and you are already on your way. Keep practicing, keep smiling, and keep going. Your journey will be your own, with its own stories and adventures. I believe in you, and I am cheering for you. Thank you, and until next time, goodbye.